Chapter 1. The Scholar of the Dead. The rain had not ceased in 3 days, drumming ceaselessly upon the slate roofs of the Imperial city. Beneath the white spires and the dripping statues of moth-eaten saints, a lone scholar walked the marble corridors of the arcane university, his candle guttering in the damp air. His name was Cassian Varro, a minor historian, a man who had grown pale and thin beneath the weight of forgotten lore. To most, he was a whisper in the archives, another scholar among dust and parchment. Yet his fascination lay not with the living histories of the Empire, but with those that had been deliberately erased. It was during his cataloguing of the restricted vaults, rooms sealed since the Third Era, that Cassian found the Vault of Black Iron, its sigil half erased by time. The seal bore the mark of the Mages Guild, intertwined with the older, more sinister symbol of the Worm Cult. No key was recorded, no record of its purpose existed, but behind it he could feel something, a pressure, a quiet pulse, like breath behind a wall. The lock yielded not to key nor spell, but to curiosity, for Cassian's own blood, spilled by accident upon the sigil, stirred the ancient wards awake. The air bent inward, and the door sighed open, as if exhaling centuries of silence. Within, he found no treasure, no skeleton, only a single tome resting upon a stand of petrified wood. Its cover was dark, not of leather, but of something harder, smoother, like bone polished by countless hands. Across its surface were words burned into the material in Daedric script, too faint to read, save when the candle's flame flickered. He who writes death commands eternity. Cassian took the book to his chamber, though every sense screamed against it. When he opened it, the pages were blank, all but the first, upon which was written a name in ancient ink, Necromancer, followed by a date lost to the Fourth Era. The name meant nothing to him then, but as he traced the letters, the ink trembled, and for a moment the candlelight dimmed. A whisper brushed his ear, not a word, but a feeling. Recognition. From that night onward, Cassian's dreams ceased to be his own. He saw cities buried beneath snow, towers of bone rising where forests once stood, and a man cloaked in shadow writing by the light of a dying star. He awoke each dawn with the echo of quills scratching across endless parchment, and though he burned incense and prayed to Artaeum for guidance, the sound would not leave him. By the fifth night, the tome began to change. Words appeared faintly on its pages, as if written in smoke, forming sentences only he could see. They spoke of the soul's weight, of the silence after the last breath, of the beauty of decay. He wrote them down by instinct, copying them before they faded, though he could not explain why. When his ink ran dry, he found that his candle's soot made for a perfect replacement. The other scholars noticed his absence from lectures, his hollowed eyes, his murmured notes to unseen listeners. Yet none dared question him. Some said they saw the light beneath his door even at midday, an unearthly blue that did not belong to any candle or spell. Cassian no longer slept. He understood that the book was not a record of the dead, but a door to them, and it had chosen him to hold the key. In the distant recesses of the vault, where shadows never fully retreated, the iron seal closed once more. But this time, a faint line of fresh blood ran beneath it, as though the lock itself had begun to breathe. Chapter 2. The Silence Beneath Artaeum. Cassian's search for Necromancer led him beyond the crumbling archives of the Imperial city and into the whispers of forbidden legend. No records of the Necromancer remained in any guild ledger or scholarly compendium, yet his name lingered like a ghost through footnotes, erased citations, and marginalia scorched from the parchment. Only one phrase appeared again and again beside the vanished references: Artaeum remembers. Artaeum, the lost isle of the Sigic Order, swallowed by the mist centuries ago, withdrawn from Nirn to a place between time and sea. Few dared speak of it, fewer still claimed to have seen it. Yet in the dark of Cassian's sleepless hours, as he studied the tome that now filled itself with living text, he began to dream of the island. Always the same vision, white towers adrift in green mist, the sky inverted, the sea whispering in tones that sounded like pages turning. Driven by the pull of the manuscript and the inexorable weight of obsession, Cassian departed Cyrodiil beneath a shrouded dawn. He traveled south along the Niben, then west to the shores of Somerset, where the waters shimmered like glass, and every gull's cry seemed to mock his frail determination. The Altmer scholars he petitioned for passage laughed him away, warning that the Sigic Vale admitted no mortal trespass. But Cassian no longer sought permission, he sought resonance. He waited for nightfall and read aloud from the tome as the tide crept in. The waves rose higher, black under the twin moons, and with each word he uttered, the air thickened with a hum like distant chanting. The sea itself began to glow faintly, a line of argent light forming upon the horizon. And then in silence the mists parted, a wound opening in the fabric of the world, and Artaeum revealed itself. He awoke on its shores, though he did not remember crossing. The air smelled of ink and salt. The ruins around him were silent, their marble arches veiled in lichen, their fountains dry for an age. The Sigic order was gone, or perhaps had never existed here at all. Instead, the island breathed with another presence, one older, hungrier. Cassian wandered through what remained of a library, its books hollow, their letters eaten away by some invisible moth. In the center of the ruin stood a mirror of still water, circular and impossibly deep. Upon its surface drifted a single scrap of parchment, a fragment from his own tome, though he had not brought it. He reached to grasp it, and the reflection shifted. He saw Naina Val there, a tall figure cloaked in robes that shimmered like oil, his face thin as a skull's shadow. The Necromancer did not speak, yet Cassian heard his thoughts echo through the marrow of his bones. Knowledge endures only when it consumes its vessel. The water erupted into motion, swallowing the reflection. The parchment dissolved between Cassian's fingers, yet its words etched themselves into his skin, black as ink. The scribe must become the script. When he awoke, he was back upon the mainland. The sea was calm, the mist gone, but the mark upon his hand remained. Within the tome, new pages had written themselves, diagrams of the Sigic seals, equations of soul binding that no mortal should comprehend. And between the lines, a faint scrawl in a different hand. You have heard the silence. Now write what it spoke. The scholar of the dead no longer sought knowledge, he had become its voice. Chapter 3. The Necromancer's Oath. The winter mists clung to the Imperial city like a veil of breath upon glass. Cassian returned changed, gaunt, wordless, his eyes carrying the far horizons of things no mortal should have seen. The others at the university avoided him, for wherever he walked candles guttered and ink turned grey, as though colour itself withdrew in deference to him. He spoke to no one, yet parchment piled high on his desk, each page inscribed in his restless hand, each line bleeding from thought to nightmare. Through those fevered nights, the tome whispered. It no longer waited for him to open it. Its voice reached him even in silence, measured, patient, as if teaching a long-forgotten lesson. And through those murmurs, Cassian began to glimpse the truth of Naina Val. Nainor had been one of Manimako's last disciples, surviving beyond the fall of the Worm King's mortal frame. But unlike the others who sought dominion or immortality through undeath, Nainor had turned inward. He sought to make thought itself eternal, to bind memory, not flesh. He had sworn an oath before the altars of both Arche and the Revenant, pledging to write the full scripture of death, to name every soul ever lost, to chronicle the precise moment of their passing, and thus make mortality itself a thing recorded, and therefore conquered. The oath demanded sacrifice, the first his own life, the second his name, the third his witness, the one who would finish what he began. Cassian read these passages in trembling wonder, though no mortal hand had written them. As the words unfurled across the parchment, his quill moved of its own accord, his wrist guided by something colder than thought. The ink beneath his skin, the mark gained on Artaeum, throbbed like a living thing, pulsing in rhythm with each syllable. Visions overtook him. Nainor kneeling before a circle of candles burning with black flame, his eyes hollowed by wisdom too vast to contain. Around him, shades gathered, the remnants of archmages, emperors, and forgotten kings, their memories drawn into a single bound volume resting upon an altar of obsidian. With each name Naina spoke, the souls of the dead shimmered and dissolved into script, imprisoned in eternal narrative. In the vision's final moment, Naynor turned his gaze toward Cassian, though centuries stood between them. "The author of death," he whispered, or perhaps it was Cassian whispering to himself, "is bound by his subject." Cassian awoke, screaming. His chamber reeked of ink and rot. The candlelight revealed that the words upon his pages were no longer his own language, but Daedric, the letters shifting like insects. The tome pulsed faintly with a heartbeat. He could not bring himself to close it. By dawn, he had taken an oath of his own. He would finish Naynor's chronicle, not to conquer death, but to understand it, to give the nameless dead a voice. Yet in the echo of that vow, something ancient stirred, pleased, patient, and waiting. Outside, the bells of the Temple of the One tolled the morning prayer. Cassian's lips moved in time with the sound, whispering words older than the Empire, older than life. To write is to resurrect. Chapter 4. Ink of bone and soul. The quills no longer obeyed him. They moved in silence when he slept, scratching their steady rhythm through the long hours before dawn, guided by hands that were not his. Cassian awoke each morning to find new pages written, lines he did not remember penning, diagrams of ritual and bonecraft, invocations that shimmered with power and menace. The tome lay open at the center of his desk, breathing faintly like a creature at rest. When he touched it, warmth throbbed beneath the cover, the pulse of a living heart made from memory and parchment. He ceased to eat. The food rotted before he could lift it. The wine turned black in the goblet. In the polished brass of his lamp, his reflection began to thin, fading at the edges like an unfinished drawing. Still, he wrote. He wrote with soot, with blood, with the dust that fell from the shelves when no wind stirred. Each word that spilled across the parchment seemed to echo through the corridors of the university, faint whispers trailing after him like the footsteps of ghosts. The mages avoided his quarters entirely now. Some claimed they heard chanting within, a low murmur that blended the voices of many. One apprentice swore he saw Cassian walking through the courtyard at midnight, though the scholar's chamber had been sealed from within. Within his fevered solitude, the boundaries between his mind and Naynor's dissolved. He saw through the Necromancer's eyes, the creation of the first sigil script upon bones of scholars executed for heresy, the transcription of prayers in flayed skin, the binding of spirits into sentences. Naynor had not merely written about death, he had used the act of writing to create it, to ensnare it, to make it obey. Every soul named in his record became captive in his ink, a history that breathed. Cassian's trembling hands followed those same motions. The ink burned his flesh. The quill hissed when it touched the page. He felt the presence of countless voices pressing against the thin membrane of the world, their silence urging him to continue. When his candle burned low, he noticed the flame no longer cast light but shadow, and within that shadow, figures began to stir. On the 21st night, the last page of the tome revealed its purpose. The words shifted and arranged themselves into a mirror of script. Beneath them appeared a single sentence in his own hand. "The one who finishes this record shall take my place." His vision blurred. The mirror of ink deepened, becoming a surface that reflected not the chamber, but an endless plain of parchment, black as the void between stars. He understood then. The tome was not merely Naynor's work. It was Naynor himself. The soul of the Necromancer, woven into every line, sustained by every reader who dared continue his scripture. And now Cassian, having written the final verse, stood upon the edge of authorship and oblivion. The candle guttered out. The ink upon the page rippled like water, and from its depths rose a pale hand, skeletal yet tender, offering him the quill. Cassian did not resist. The feather brushed his palm, and cold flooded his veins, bright and pure as moonlight. He wrote a final word, his name, and the tome closed of its own accord. By morning, his chamber was empty. The scholars found only a single book upon the desk, its cover unmarked, its pages blank, save for one inscription upon the first. Cassian Varro, Scribe Eternal. Chapter 5. The Last Script of Mortality. For years, the tome lay dormant in the sealed vault beneath the arcane university, buried once more behind iron sigils and chains of starlit silver. None dared touch it. Some said the book breathed softly when the moons aligned. Others claimed that if one listened closely, the faint scratch of a quill could be heard within the binding. Whatever the truth, the tome waited, patient, aware, until another scholar came to open it. But this time it was not an imperial hand that broke the seal. It was a priest of Artaeum, Archcurate Cassian Varro, charged by the Synod to cleanse the lingering heresies of the worm cult. His faith was unshakable, his wards flawless. Yet when he touched the book, his holy runes dimmed to ash. Upon the first page he saw not the name of Cassian Varro, nor of Ninor, but the faint reflection of his own face. He read, though every instinct warned him to stop. The text unfolded as if remembering itself, pages that had been blank now filled with histories of every death the priest had ever witnessed, comrades lost to plague, the faces of the departed at the altars, even his mother's last breath rendered in perfect detail. Each line bled sorrow, but it was not his handwriting that recorded it. It was Cassian's, or perhaps Ninor's, or perhaps something older still. Cassian felt his thoughts blur, his faith slipping through his fingers like sand. The words pulsed beneath his gaze, not symbols but living things writhing, shaping themselves anew. Through the trembling haze of revelation, he understood the book's final truth. It was not meant to defy death. It was meant to preserve it, to write mortality itself into permanence, so that the cycle could never end. And then came the choice. The tome whispered it, gentle as breath. Finish the script and end the forgetting. Cassian saw visions in the ink, the weir of souls unraveling, the black worm god rising again in echo, the stars blinking like eyes that would never close. He saw Cassian, standing at the center of that endless plain of parchment, his skin translucent, his veins filled with luminous ink. The scholar raised his quill toward him, neither pleading nor commanding, merely offering. Tears blurred the priest's sight. He dipped his hand into the ink that bled from the page, felt its chill like the caress of snow, and wrote a single sentence. Let the memory of death remain, but let its hunger cease. The tome shuddered. Light poured from its spine, flooding the vault with the scent of parchment and storm. When the brilliance faded, the book lay open once more, empty, save for one final line in an unknown hand. The circle endures only in remembrance. They found no trace of Cassian Varro. Only the echo of his prayer lingered in the stones, and for a brief age the world felt lighter, as though death itself paused to listen. In the centuries that followed, scholars whispered of the Codex Mortuum, the Book of the Dead that writes itself. Some claimed to hear it in dreams. Others found its pages appearing in their own journals, faint and gray as fading breath. And somewhere beyond the boundary of time and ink, a quill still moves, slow, deliberate, eternal.